morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to day 3 of the Singapore Week of Innovation and Technology. My name is Sue, and it is day 3 for us, but I hear some of you are here for the very first time, so I warmly welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning. Allow me to introduce what's happening here at the Beyond stage, where we curated the best speakers to, of course, come on stage in no time. So our track today is Scaling AI Innovations Globally, and the panel is organized by Enterprise Singapore's Global Innovation Alliance, GIA. Now, let me tell you a little bit about that. It is a network of Singapore and overseas partners in major innovation hubs and key demand markets, focusing on tech and innovation. Now, under GIA, Enterprise SG is partnering in market players to promote market access and cross-border innovation, which is, of course, in more than 40 countries. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I'm going to introduce what's happening live on stage for the panel, allow me to give you some questions as we roll on with the discussion. So, the panel they're going to meet real soon, we'll be talking about some key questions. For example, the development of AI, as you know, is moving at lightning speed. So there are more sophisticated models and applications being rolled out every single day. As we're speaking right now, there's another one out in the market. So how can AI startups keep up where ideas are being disrupted and obsolete so quickly? And how does large corporations like yourself, or maybe you belong to academia, universities, and venture capital as well, enable AI's entrepreneurs internationally success? Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you find all your answers as we listen to the esteemed panelists coming up on stage very, very soon. And of course, this is brought to you by Enterprise SG. I want to also give a quick shout out to Enterprise SG for a tremendous job, of course, hosting Switch 2025. I believe that we could have a record attendance and just some of the most high quality speakers over the last 3 days. So, before I bring on our moderator and the panelists, can we give a very big round of applause for Enterprise SG? Well done, team. A pleasure to invite our panelists to come on stage and to, of course, moderate as well. I'd like to, of course, introduce Director Infocom and Media Enterprise Singapore, John Lu, as the moderator. Let's welcome John first to come on stage. Thank you, John. Welcome and good morning. Please be seated. It is always such a treat to have such esteemed panelists joining us on stage. Let's welcome all of them to come on stage together. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, we need your big, big round of applause to invite them to come on stage. Panelists, please. Thank you. Thank you for the applause. Now, John, you're the very first one to start this morning. I hope you got some really difficult questions coming our panelists' way. Yes? Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Please be seated. Have yourself a lively, fiery time this morning. Over to you.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 3 of Switch. My name is John Lu. I'm from Enterprise Singapore, and I'll be the moderator for this panel. It's a very exciting topic. It's called Scaling AI. I'm sure it's a topic that we will all want to talk about, right? How do we grow fast? But before we start on the questions, I will let the panelists introduce themselves. Maybe let's go with Arun first.
Okay, cool. Hi, I'm Arun. I'm from Grab. I lead strategy and programs, along with a few other functions like data governance. I've been with Grab for a little over 9 years, so I've been from the early days of Grab in Singapore and seen the journey through. And I've been more of an engineer from my previous career, worked in different parts of the world, US, Europe, starting from India, also worked in the Middle East as well, mostly in the engineering space, multiple domains, and excited to be in Singapore working for Grab. That's me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Caesar Sengupta. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Arta Finance. We are an AI wealth platform. We serve both consumers in US and Singapore through our wealth business. And then we have a B2B enterprise business where we take our entire AI wealth platform and offer that to banks and wealth managers around the world. We've been doing this for about 4 years, and we're now trying to become an AI native company. So it's a very interesting discussion here for me. Prior to this, I used to run fintech at Google, so Google Pay, Google Finance, payments platform. and the next billion users effort.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Abbott. I'm one of the founding partners at Blitzscaling Ventures, a San Francisco-based venture capital firm that's built around the thesis in the book Blitzscaling by Reid Hoffman and Chris Ye. We're currently investing in early-stage AI companies. I think we're one of the most exciting emerging manager firms in the world at this point, investing in AI, if I could say so myself. And I'm also the co-founder of a community that is growing worldwide called AI Salon, and we're excited to be launching a chapter here in Singapore on Saturday afternoon. Thank you.
Nice. Hi, everyone. My name is Pandu. I work for AWS. I lead the solution architecture team focused on startups, both early stage and late stage startups. I've been with AWS for about 5 years and been in a couple of startups before that. So looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thanks everyone. So I'll just give a bit of background and context on why we want to talk about scaling AI. As we all know, AI is transforming industries, right? And founders and builders of AI, they face the challenge of scaling innovations, but at the same time, to ensure that the product stays relevant, they stay competitive, right? And for startups in particular, the ambition is high, right? They want to start global, they want to go global. But we all know that scaling too fast can sometimes stretch resources, right? And also maybe dilute their focus. So that is a concern that we need to also talk about from an enterprise level, company level. But I also want to talk about, ecosystem, right? Or bring this up to the panel to discuss about how startups, if they want to grow fast, can they leverage on the ecosystem, right? To help them go far, right? So go fast, go far. So that's basically the background context. So I'll start with a question to all the panelists here on this, right? What does it take to design AI products, teams, strategies that are born global, right? So we need to go global. And how to adapt to change when the world of AI is growing and moving so fast, right? So maybe I'll just put this question. It's a big and broad question, but I'll just let all the panelists answer, right? Maybe we can start with Arun. You want to start with this?
Yeah, so growing with AI quickly. So just a bit of context for Grab, and I'm sure a lot of you who are based in Singapore know Grab as a company. But in terms of our AI journey, we started quite early. So AI, the latest democratization of AI is something which we are trying to catch up, and it's a journey every company is trying to do. But AI has been ingrained in a lot of our offering from the early days, be it the fraud offering, demand forecasting. So it's very much part of it. And so as part of that journey, something we've realized and learned was to get our data story right. So that was a key aspect of it. We started this journey 5-6 years back, where some of the data fundamental, right? Getting your data quality right, data lineage, making sure people have the right access, right? So what we believe in the organization is trying to get innovation at the nodes of the every node of the organization. And to do that right, you need to get your data at the right time, right place, and it's agile. When I mean agile is in the form that it can be used for the use cases trying to solve for, right? So get your data story right. It takes time, right? You might, in the early days, you're getting it right, it helps you, but as you have grown as an organization, you might spend time, get us the basics, and all of it doesn't need to be done all on your own, right? There's quite a lot of partners. So we work very closely with AWS, who's been helping us out in a lot of these things. So you don't need to think of trying to solve it on your own, but at the scale you're growing and the kind of problems you're solving, you might think of trying to do that, some of that on your own, but work with your partners, right? So that's one part of the getting a data story right. That's the first thing. The second thing which we do, and this goes to a bit of a culture and tooling aspect. So as the latest democratization of AI, one thing we have spent time is to try to educate and teach them what the value add is, right? And it needs some repeated tooling, training. But beyond that, we have built a lot of internal tools. And the internal tools have been trying to make sure that any team which really needs to innovate, we try to make that infrastructure problem, the access problem, as seamless as possible for them, right? We rely on partners, but we build our own, what we call an internal agent platform, which helps the teams to go about building their capabilities, right? So this agent platform has things like evaluations, things like the typical guardrails, which we rely on, things like Bedrock provided by AWS. So those kind of things we build. On top of that, what we also do is we build our own ML ops infrastructure, right? We rely on our own, and at the scale we are and the kind of use cases, we do it on our own. And our belief is that a lot of the latest AI innovations are significantly helping internal productivity. So we try to make sure the internal productivity use cases are solved as seamless and possible through these tools and education. So that's how we've been thinking of it. And which that kind of applies to even the startups. An analogy I use is like a typical high-performance car. You have a good brakes, you go faster. You have a good oil, which is your data, you can go longer as well, right? So that's something really works out well.
So go fast and go far. Yeah. Caesar, please.
I actually have, I agree with a lot of what you said, but I think there's a slightly bigger story that's happening here, which is if you look at what's happening with AI, I mean, everybody right now is crazy about the AI evaluations, NVIDIA, and all this kind of stuff. But that's actually not the most interesting piece. The interesting piece is fundamentally how AI is enabling companies to get created. So we're about 4 years old. We were an AI company, machine learning, before AI became sexy. But today, like, I feel very threatened that there is another AI native company that's just started in the last 3 or 4 months that is built completely differently. If you think about companies that are going to get built now, the way they raise funds is going to be different. VCs are looking at different metrics now for AI companies versus previous AI companies. How you build products changes. The product itself that you're building changes. Which market you cater to changes. The entire internal composition of the company can be totally different. So I think there's a much, much bigger change that's happening over the next 10 years. And that's sort of what I find super exciting. I mean, this is probably the most exciting time to have been alive. I thought this was exciting when we were going through the mobile revolution. This is 1000x that. So I think the opportunity for all of us is to rethink how companies, products, teams, tech stacks are completely built. And that's where it's going to be really exciting over the next decade.
Building on that, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. So we're at Blitzscaling Ventures typically looking for companies that can blitzscale, that can become the market leader in large new markets. So traditionally, you're looking for signs of product-led growth or things that can create network effects and generate lock-in. But now everything is changing so quickly, and as you say, the very way that you build a company, one of the metrics that is now commonly referenced on LinkedIn all the time is revenue per employee. And historically, the typical SaaS company would have somewhere between $250,000, maybe $500,000 in revenue per employee, but now you're seeing companies with 2.5 or 5 million in revenue per employee, or companies making public pledges saying, we don't plan to hire more than 40 people, ever. And so to your point, that changes the organization entirely. Well, what about the companies that they're selling into then? Are they thinking about the consequences of adopting their tools? Yesterday I had lunch with a good friend who is based here in Singapore, who is the Deputy Director of AI Policy and matters like that at a global level. And he said, you know, for the large enterprise companies that are adopting AI, the biggest concern is risk. And if you think about it, an organization that's already very large has a lot more to lose than they may have to gain from a particular AI implementation. And then you think, well, how many possible AI implementations might they be conducting across their enterprise? It could be dozens. And from the startup's perspective, they're all thinking about the incremental improvements that their one little niche product is going to have on the organization, and assuming that that organization is just excited about the cost savings or the headcount reductions. But if you add that up across the tech stack and across the entire organization, it's nothing less than disruptive. And so if you're the large organization, now this may all add up to something that I don't want to say causes revolt, but it could cause concerns, cultural concerns, customer satisfaction concerns that may not be there now, but could build up like a tsunami and result in some backlash that could have a very large cost. And so one of the things that I'm starting to look at, in addition to the metrics that we've always looked at, is you know, sort of the startup sensitivity and willingness to help think through and mitigate and be part of the solution about the unintended consequences of their implementation as part of this broader stack of implementations, because that could almost be a leading indicator of sustainable ARR. If you know, if you're empathetic, if you're communicating how all employees can see you as part of the solution, you're helping assure employee buy-in and longer-term usership. So there shouldn't be, you know, revenue growth and then revenue cratering, at least in theory. So I'm starting to look for founders that are more cognizant of that and thinking through that, not just speed, but concern for the healthiness over time of the human people that they're selling to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you. Pandu?
Yeah. So I just want to address that first question that you asked about how, like when there's so much innovation happening globally, what it means for local ecosystem and the local startups and things. So from the vantage point we have, which we're very fortunate to kind of see a lot of different innovations happening across Southeast Asia, and what we see is that there is all these foundation that comes from a lot of the work that's happening in open source, a lot of the work that's happening in some of the frontier labs. There's so many great models that are coming out, and there's so much innovation that's just every 3 months there's like a leap in some sort of new breakthrough and some sort of new innovation that kind of comes in. But what's really interesting to us is when we see a lot of local players using those foundational models, but then building completely local solutions on top of that, and completely trying to kind of create these local experiences. So there has been a lot of customers that are looking at voice-based solutions, because while there is all these different models that are coming in, it's still difficult for a lot of people to type in and do a lot of interaction through a chatbot through typing like you would normally do. So when you go into rural villages, when you go into different sectors like agriculture or healthcare and all that, you need voice-based solutions. So speech to text, text to speech, all these are kind of very native, and there's a lot of local companies that have taken models and then fine-tuned them to work better with a lot of dialects. So you go to a place like Vietnam, there are, it feels like you're only speaking Vietnamese, but there's so many dialects of Vietnamese that getting them to understand and making it work for actual local solutions, right? So similarly, we have a layer of those, which is people who are building, customizing these models to work locally and make it work for local use cases. The second is actually trying to solve very local things. Like in Singapore, there is a startup called Kabam Robotics. They do a lot of work in commercial security, in hospitality and all that, where you must have seen a lot of these robots that, like just walking around malls and taking pictures and all that. They worked with us to actually add AI capabilities to their robots now, using Amazon Bedrock at the back and using a bunch of the foundation models at the back. They are not only so they already had the robots that could look at images and all that, but now the robot can actually understand what's happening and then take some actions based on that. It could the robots seem a lot more intelligent, where they can come up to you and like talk to you, or like give you a little message or do something. So that's again completely the same hardware, but now they are smarter because they have this underlying layer that's powering them. And then, yeah, finally, I think there are lots of very interesting use cases beyond, like what we saw. The first wave of AI innovation was largely around automating customer service. That's what everybody was going for at one point of time. But now with the agentic thing that has been there for the past few months, a lot of companies are now saying, okay, how can we make these agents to actually go and perform actions, conduct payments, transactions, browse the web, do research, do stuff in education. There's so many different use cases that just open up, and I think the main thing that we're seeing is that companies are opening up more and more to the idea of letting agents take actual actions, still within guardrails, still within responsible AI frameworks and all that, but they are allowing them to kind of actually go and act on behalf of humans, right? And that's going to be, it's probably going to not be an overnight shift, like some people say, but then it's probably going to take a few years, but that's going to fundamentally change everything, like everything of how we do stuff, right? Today I book a Grab. I still look at, where's the cab arrived, what's it doing and all that. The next time I could just be like, when I wake up and when I brush my teeth, it knows that I need to book a Grab at this time, and an agent is doing that for me in the back and just preparing me for the day, right? So we will all get to that kind of a future pretty soon, but that's going to fundamentally change everything that every company has to think about how they offer their services. Every consumer has to think about how they're going to use these services, and both sides are going to change pretty dramatically.
Thanks a lot. At this point, I just wanted to go back to this term that Cesar used about called AI native, right? I'll get some views from you about what does it mean to you, and can an AI native company really scale faster?
Without a doubt. I mean, this is not even theory anymore. You're seeing companies like Harvey, Sierra AI. There's one in Singapore called Manus AI. These have all gone like 0 to 50, 100 million in revenue globally within basically a year, 2 years, 3 years. So the scaling is definitely starting to happen. And there are probably 5 companies that I don't know about. I probably don't know about a lot, but most of us would not know about that are scaling like that because they're too busy sort of scaling right now. So I fundamentally think AI is creating a new kind of company. And one of the things Jeff brought up, which is large companies, many of the progressive leaders are starting to see this, and they realize the challenges they have in navigating this space, but at the same time, they also see this new world that's getting created. For example, we offer wealth management, right? And in wealth management, there's always been this key role for a financial planner and a relationship manager and an advisor. And one of the things we offer in our platform is an AI agent that you can just talk to, right? That'll actually help you understand your finances, help you come up with investment plans, all this kind of stuff. But when we work with banks or wealth managers, we provide them that agent for their relationship managers. So now the relationship manager can now take on twice the number of clients they could have previously done. So there are ways of navigating it. And what I see is these large company progressive leaders who see the change that's happening, them trying to think about what does it mean when you have AI native companies around the world, and how do you sort of embrace this? So,
thanks, Cesar. Thanks for that. So now, perhaps timely to talk about the other part of the discussion today on navigating while companies are moving and scaling, right? So it's about speed bumps or friction points that they might face as they are growing fast. And some of these things are evolving, right? Even in the AI arena, we have standards, we have regulations, and founders, we need to think about this as they go into new markets, right? With some and working with government, for example. So some of these things are part of the growth journey, and I think they should take that into consideration. So we want to go into this segment now to talk about navigation, right? As they grow. So my first question, and this is for Pandu and Jeff, is how can AI startups navigate through the rapidly changing global environment without losing agility, without losing focus? So maybe you want to get your thoughts on that.
Okay, I can take that first. There is a lot of hurdles that a startup could face today, right? I mean, as a cloud services provider, we've probably seen demand way more than supply for like the first time in like the history of the cloud. Like the cloud was always meant to be this infinite capacity that you could just kind of latch on to, but the reality is that GPUs and the way like you need to have GPUs in every single part of the world, and the production of these GPUs and everything just means that every provider out there needs to keep building capacity. And as you build capacity, all that capacity is just getting consumed, right? And a lot of that capacity initially was just getting consumed for training models. Like everybody needed large amount of capacity to train models. That's quickly shifting to inference. The models are already there, but more and more businesses and consumers want to kind of keep inferring. There has to be a new feature that just launches on one of these apps, and then like the internet breaks kind of thing, right? So So that, I think, is definitely a challenge for a lot of startups when they're starting up to kind of get the right capacity and get the right partner to kind of build on. And that's something that we have been working a lot on to make sure that we have programs, we have ways for startups to quickly decide how they want to kind of navigate. We have a very wide variety of GPUs, including a lot of our own custom GPUs that we've built so that we can provide and keep up to that capacity demand that keeps rising. But I think for startups, that is going to be one major area. And to navigate that, there are multiple ways that you could look at. One is you don't always need to start building with your own GPUs and your own things and all that. There are a lot of pre-baked models. There's a lot of pre-baked services, API-based calls that you can start with. And I would say that startups would need to focus on the innovation part and worry about the models and the serving of the models and the infrastructure. Leave that to like an infrastructure provider that can actually provide that infrastructure, so that you're not grappling with trying to buy GPUs, ship them across the world, and like deal with all those things. The other challenge is also around when there is a lot of distractions in the AI world. There's continuously new things that keep coming, and you might have spent weeks or months, hopefully weeks, launching a new feature, and then you see your competitor just added some better image recognition or some speech model, which was like, oh, that looks more state of the art than mine. I don't think that, like we talk to startups all the time and we advise them that it's not necessary to be always like, oh, the new model has come and I need to integrate that model immediately. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of news that and media always kind of hypes up a lot of the new releases and things. But what really works fundamentally, in fact, we have seen startups that went to a newer model and said, oh, this doesn't work as good as some of the older versions, and gone back to older versions. So you need to see what works and then stay with that till work on your regular product cycles that like you would in any normal thing. So don't get carried away by the hype is what I would say is the second thing.
So I'm going to focus on the organization and product side. So if you're an AI company, I think the first thing that means is you're building a product that is AI. You're selling something that's AI. But the other side of that is, are you an AI first company, which is how are you using AI to build your organization and manage your business? And I think I'll leave the discussion with you did a really good job of covering kind of the AI infrastructure side. But when scaling globally, for example, imagine a company coming from Singapore, you immediately have to be thinking about other markets. The market size here requires you to be global first. There's so many advantages now to being a company that applies AI first. You think about localization, think about product adaptation. All of these things previously would have had to done much more based on human capabilities, right? Having offshore offices and employees that spoke the language in each one of the countries. And I remember speaking several years ago to a really successful founder based here in Singapore who said, the secret to our success has been assembling this team. We have our person from Vietnam who is our product person, and we have our person from Singapore that used to manage a regional business. It was very much about the team and having all of the pieces that had the cultural capabilities and the market knowledge. So much of that now can be accomplished much more quickly through the use of AI tools. So I think it's going to be much easier to localize and test your product and test the market feedback without having to have those costly and slower, let's say, market expansions into physical infrastructure and organizations in other parts of the region or of the world. And this would be true in Europe as it would be in Latin America or Southeast Asia. So being an AI-first company in terms of how you use the AI in your company, I think is probably going to be the hallmark of success of being a successful AI company or any other kind of startup company.
Caesar, you want to add something?
Yeah, actually, a couple of things I wanted to add. I think one was, I think, you mentioned how Singapore being a small market, naturally things international. Actually, in my experience, that's not been the true for most of the startups in Singapore.
Oh, that's a pity.
Because Singapore is a very rich market. So a lot of startups tend to get very focused on Singapore itself. For forgetting that there's a very large world out there. So I think with AI, one of the big things that, it's changed over the years. I think more and more startups now are starting to think about international. But like the fact that you can open up globally is a big message that I've been trying to get out to Singapore startups. Like, we're a tiny country. We cannot just cater to our 6 million people. We have to be able to cater to the 6 billion people in the world. And there's no reason why we can't. I mean, Israeli companies don't think like that. A Bay Area company never says, I'm designing for the Bay Area, right? They're like, built for the world. And so I think that's one. The second is actually, because Singapore is such an international place, our ability to know the rest of the world is actually really, really a competitive advantage, right? And so that's the other message, which is you don't just have to focus on Singapore and the US, which I will say, even as a startup, we've been guilty of, which is Singapore and the US as our two markets. But we can actually cater to the rest of the world too. It's a very, very large place, and it's open, and especially with the current geopolitics, there's a huge advantage to being a Singapore company that's building AI services at a global level. We can actually access most markets without getting caught up in the bigger geopolitical fights that are happening.
Yeah, thanks for that. So on that note, I just want to double down on this thought that you have about Singapore-based companies and geopolitics, right? Because you want to go global, and they have to navigate. What are the geopolitical considerations, right, as they grow and scale into new markets at this point of time, right? In this world, I think we're talking now about geopolitical considerations, right? Not just for startups, but companies when they grow overseas. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I'd say, one of the big things about geopolitical aspects is obviously access to those markets. And being a Singaporean company, you have the Singapore brand, you're able to do it. But the second is actually regulatory aspects. We're a fintech, we're licensed in 2 countries, in Singapore and the US, so we understand the regulations very well. But where it's becoming really, really interesting is around AI. And there's this very interesting approach that different countries and governments are taking to AI. Now, Singapore has been very AI positive, very AI friendly, right from the cabinet down to every governmental organization is trying to encourage the adoption of AI. So that's actually a huge benefit to companies where you can build a global service that's available from Singapore that's powered with AI, and the regulations that apply are Singapore. So versus sort of, if you look at certain other jurisdictions where they're taking a much more fear-driven approach to AI and will end up killing innovation that happens in that space, right? So that's another thing for startups to really think about as they're thinking about, how to grow globally from Singapore or to be based in Singapore.
Thanks for that. Arun, you want to share your perspectives on this?
Yeah, so adding on to what Caesar has been saying, from what I have observed, and we work closely, John and I, we work closely on different aspects of AI with the government. I've been super impressed. We work with different other governments, but Singapore has taken a very, not just being the AI first, but they're like, we want to be leading in that space as a government, right? And that's something very much, they encourage the ecosystem to contribute and play a role, right? And that's something the startup, as a startup, it's a great place to start off, right? Classic example, and to a point which Jeff talked about guardrails and and Reliance and all that. In the early days, Singapore set up the AI ethics, the Singapore AI model framework, which is like substantially helping you to set your guardrails to say how you should think about building AI, right? And it's not point of trying to look at AI as just purely a risk as a cost enabler, but more of being a value generator, right? You really can get that right. So some of these fundamentals which Singapore government enables you to do is so important and can enable you to scale. And you can think of your PMF, your product market fit, and hyperscale in parallel with all these capabilities being provided, right? That's one part of it. And the other beauty of Singapore as a region and its relative neutrality is it gives you a benefit as you go into any other country, right? They're known as a Singapore company, and something we have also noticed as we look at scaling as well. And that benefit is something the Singapore government also will push and help you out. So that those two are great benefits which any company sitting out of Singapore can really take a gain of.
Thanks a lot for that. So at this juncture, I think we're going to talk a little bit about the future, right? So what's next, right? I'm sure the audience wants to know about this. So I just want to put this question to all the panelists here today on a bit about the future, about what's the single most critical piece of advice you would give to a high-growth startup working from Singapore as a launchpad for global growth, right? So this question, I just wanted to get the thoughts from all the panelists here as we close off this panel. Arun, you want to go first?
Okay, I'll go first. So I did talk a lot about the guardrails, so I wouldn't hamper on that point. So one thing to a point which Pandu mentioned about trying to ensure your work with your partners and try and solve a lot of your issues, for example, infrastructure. One thing we have noticed is the space is moving very fast, as the other panelists talked about. Trying to recognize the inflection points early makes a big difference. And if you're able to determine what could be the inflection point by the time when you're launching that product can do. And that needs a bit of this is a prediction, but there's also a lot of guessing and learning through the process, right? I'll give you a classic example to connecting to some of the points Jeff and Pandu talked about is like the AI voice assistant. This is a capability we have in Grab. So this is primarily trying to tackle visually impaired users. We were like, okay, we have quite a lot of them who want to be using Grab, but they're not able to read through, right? And we're like, okay, modality was something was picking up, right? So this is somewhere in 2023, we're like, oh, we knew modality was picking up in with. So we're like, okay, why not we start tackling that problem, right? And that was something clearly we did. And then to an earlier point, which was talked about on how to make sure it's localized, simple thing we realized is that the model was not able to, in Singapore example, able to deal with the Singapore dialects, the Singlish, for example, right? So we did a very simple thing as like 1,000 voice samples. Some of them were Grab employees talking about a street name or a name of a building, and even customers helping us to provide that information, which would ensure that the accuracy improved by like 100%. Right? So ability to determine what could potentially be the areas you could be looking at in terms of inflection point and combining that with local nuances can make a big difference.
Caesar.
So I don't know about advice for other startups. I can tell you what's keeping me up at night and what I wake up thinking about every morning, which is how do I turn my company completely AI native? Because there is this new sort of, it's almost like a new set of physics rules that have come about. I'm an engineer by training, have been an engineer for many times. We grew up in the world of definitive programming, right? Once I wrote code, it always operated the same way. LLMs are different. The whole probabilistic way, it's like, you went from classical physics to quantum physics. And that is going to completely change how every function, every aspect of my company is. And so I think for us over the next few years, it's really thinking about, even as we are scaling, how do we scale in a way where, like I haven't made a pledge, but I don't want to grow my company beyond 150 people, right? We are 90 right now. And I think we can get to like several tiers of revenue more with those number of people. And to do that, like, how do you do it? What does it mean for the culture? What does it mean for the company is sort of truly profound. So that's the thing that keeps me most excited and up at night.
Okay, and Jeff?
So I think having open conversation with employees and customers and society about what it means to be an AI-first company, about how building a startup or any organization in the future is going to be different, and allowing people time and providing space for people to get bought in is going to be important, because we're all rushing headlong into something, right? We have an abundance of compute power, we have an abundance of intelligence, we have information overload, and we're all rushing headlong into this in a way that is cumulative. And I'm not certain that we all know what this is going to add up to. And there could arrive a moment when we think, it might have been better to have done things a little differently. But we're probably not going to have time along the way to stop. Someone once described the AI market as having game theoretic qualities, right? Whether it's national security competition or whether it's market dynamics, we're not going to slow down. The need to compete, the need to win your market, those forces are stronger than the desire to stop and reflect. Forget about regulation. Even to just stop and ask yourself, do I have time to do this differently? And so actually one of the points, I just wrote a book, it came out 2 weeks ago, AI and the Art of Being Human. And one of the things that we've proposed in there is just a series of tools that, whether it be a startup or any organization, adopt is to just take a pause sometimes when AI is presenting you with a response that you didn't expect, or maybe makes you a little uncomfortable, or you're not certain whether it's within your values or your guardrails, to have the agency to stop and reflect and provoke conversation and just take those moments of wisdom to say, is this how we want to be doing things? And to empower everybody to have those kind of moments in an organization. I think building those pauses in along the way gives us agency, gives us a sense of buy-in, so that we don't end up in a place that doesn't feel like where we wanted to get, whether that be at the individual company level or at the aggregate level. So that would be my advice to a startup or any organization, is to consciously take those opportunities to build in those, it's okay to pause and talk about this, and before rushing forward.
Okay, from advice standpoint, what I would say is, I mean, I don't know exactly what everybody in the audience does here, right? So if you're a developer, learn how to embrace AI in development. It's just going to make you much faster. The first few times you do it, you may be like, oh, this doesn't work, it's all hype. You're probably not doing it right. You probably want to kind of, just keep practicing and learning. If you are somebody who's like an information worker, who's like, into data and analytics and all that, again, learn how to use AI, learn how to use the tools that are available and things. So the core fundamental thing is you need to skill yourself into, just like when the mobile thing happened, when internet happened, maybe many of you just grew up with the internet around you or grew up with mobiles around you. But a lot of us who were there before that had to learn and relearn ourselves, and just being open-minded and relearning. And especially if you are leading or running a startup, or you're the leader for a startup, being able to balance and say, don't go too much towards the hype, but don't go too much towards, like just dissing it and saying, oh, all this is not happening, we don't need AI. You need to be really balanced and show that to your team as well, so that they learn from you and they're going to pick signals that you give them, right? So, so that's going to be like the key for everyone to relearn and adapt themselves to just use every tool that's out there. I mean, I have probably like 20 AI tools and apps on my phone. I just play around with them. I try different things, and I tell everybody around me why they aren't, like using this. And so just be that person who just keeps trying new things and be ready to learn with an open mind.
Yeah, so on this topic about scaling and growing, I mean, I'm sure we can go on and on, but we're running out of time, so I will have to call this panel to a close. I hope the insights and the views from the panelists will give you food for thought, right? And thinking about how you scale and how you want to think about the future, whatever you are in the industry, right? So whether you're a developer or a company or a startup. So with this, I'll bring the panel to a close. Thank you, panelists, for your time and your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. A round of applause for the panelists. Please stay. Can I please get the gentleman to rise for a photo, and also to officially thank our moderator as well, John, for asking all the hard questions. Can we please gather our gentlemen as close as possible for the official photo? Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you learned a lot from our conversation on stage. Guard railing is something that we're looking about. And of course, working with partners to build the infrastructure, recognizing inflection points early as well. I believe we got the photo. Ladies and gentlemen, what a treat it is to listen to our titans in the industry. Can we send them off with a very big round of applause? Thank you. We will see you later. I believe you might have a few seconds to catch them before they go. Of course, many positive takeaway from the panel as well. SG is truly very AI positive, and we're talking about taking time to scale in a meaningful way. And also as well, I think in Singapore, we call this lifelong learning, learning new tools and investing in yourself. I hope that you learned a lot by listening in today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've got another panel to go. And before we start with the brand new conversation on stage, I'd like to encourage you to come and take as far front role as possible. Make yourself very comfortable in the middle. We would love to gather as many of you here before you start the next panel. So let me tell you what's happening live on stage for the final panel, I would call it, for day 3 of Switch. Now, the title is Breaking Language Barriers, Scaling with Sea Lion's Multilingual AI. Would you like to speak more than, say, 10 languages? Maybe maybe that could be a dream come true for you with the, of course, tech. Now, on stage, we will be exploring the journey of Sea Lion, why it was created, the challenges of building AI for Southeast Asia, and the breakthroughs it has enabled. Ladies and gentlemen, the next segment is brought to you by AI Singapore, AISG. I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists to come on stage along with our moderator. Please put your hands together to welcome Mr. Wei Yuan Sing, Director, Technology Cluster from MP Group, to drive the conversation. A round of applause for Sing. Thank you. Thank you, Sing, for doing all the prep work. And of course, gentlemen, a very warm welcome to day 3 of Switch. We're excited to hear from you. And that's rock and roll. Here we go.
Hey, thanks everyone for being here today on a Friday morning. I have really a wonderful panel of really speakers and panelists with me today. If you look at the topic itself, right, LLM is is a big thing that is changing our world as we speak. But a lot of people don't actually realize, right, that LLM, right, they focus a lot on large, they focus a lot on model, but they don't actually realize the key implication, right, of the word language within the LLM concept. All right, I think this is where today's panel discussion, right, we want to share and go a bit deeper, all right, into this particular LLM concept, and not in general. I mean, we all know the DeepSeeks, ChatGPTs, etc. Right? That's very commonly known, and I think a lot of us are using multiple LLMs in our daily lives, in our daily work itself. But I think what we want to do today, all right, is actually go a bit deeper and look at really something that perhaps it might be at the back of your head when you're using LLMs, but maybe in your everyday experience, right, within Singapore, well, within a developed world, right, that it might not be at the forefront. What I'm saying is that, we know that the mainstream LLMs today are basically English language models, right? But not everyone speaks English in the world today, right? And particularly not everybody can also write English. And not even everybody can write their own language, be it their mother tongue, be it Thai, Khmer, or whatever. Now, we are in an interesting part of the world where we are constituted by communities with many, many languages. All right, I mentioned just now Khmer, Thai, Bahasa Indonesia, etc. Now, this complexity, right, means that having the mainstream or the larger LLMs, right, means that a lot of the technological advantage that is accorded by an English LLM does not trickle to the communities, right, that require the empowerment, through, AI-enabled technology. So what does that mean? I think today's discussion is really about, is based on that thinking, right? Not everybody knows English, right? Not everybody speaks English. Does that mean they're cut out of the whole, advantage or revolution, that AI is giving to the whole world, right? Should that be the case, all right, for us, for our reality in Southeast Asia? Right. A big thanks to Enterprise Singapore, the Switch team, for having the panel, as well as AI Singapore. All right, and also my fine panelists. All right, Alan, co-founder and CEO at Good Buds. All right, marketing platform company. All right, Isaac. All right, who's actually volunteer product manager at Better SG, and of course Mark, head of strategy. All right, as well as growth at AI Singapore. Now, the 3 panelists with me today, I think we are very passionate about Sea Lion, all right? And this is the first time I'm mentioning this, even though you see, Sea Lion, right, within the board behind me, is because this is actually an LLM that was actually developed by Southeast Asians for Southeast Asia, right? Let me repeat that again. An LLM developed by Southeast Asians for Southeast Asia. And the gentlemen with me today, 2 of them, all right, actually have used and deployed Sea Lion, all right, within very interesting use cases, right. And Mark himself, right, is a key flag bearer, right, to promote the adoption, all right, and deployment of Sea Lion, all right, within this region and beyond itself. I will never do justice, to the gentlemen in front of me, right, by introducing them. But so maybe I can spend a few minutes, for these gentlemen to introduce themselves, what they do, what they're building. All right, then we can have a fantastic discussion for the rest of today's session. Maybe we can start Alan first.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. I'm Alan. I actually founded Goodbots maybe about 2023, and what we are building is a fully autonomous marketing department to help companies to build capabilities using AI to develop customer experience, very strong customer experience. So I personally has more than 20 plus years of marketing experience in the B2B space, and I've gone through all the differences of working in an American company, giving us material for us to use in Asia, and we go like, this doesn't work, right? So I'm very honored to be here to talk about Sea Lion. It's a great experience with the product at this point in time.
Thanks. Isaac, perhaps you can share with us, what you're doing and hopefully what's not keeping you up at night.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Isaac Lee. I'm a volunteer product manager for Better.sg. In my day job, I'm also a product manager at a company called Endawas. And I guess the reason I'm here today is because we were working on a project for one of the women's rights organizations here in Singapore called Aware. What we developed for them was a volunteer application form that allowed people to not only apply through typing, but also speaking, and also the ability to assess whether or not that volunteer is suitable for specific roles within the organization. Now, you can imagine as a women's rights organization, values are very important when they assess candidates. And the old process was that typically the administrator would need to speak to volunteers in order to determine whether or not someone might be suitable for a role, especially a frontline role where they actually interact with problem cases or with clients themselves, right? So what we did was, as we were developing this solution, we were experimenting with a lot of different models that's available. OpenAI, we were using Anthropic, we were using a lot of different reasoning models. And what we found was that using Sea Lion was actually the best model that was suitable for our use case, because volunteers in Singapore can come from all walks of life. They're not just English-speaking volunteers. We also need Mandarin-speaking volunteers. We also need people who can speak Tamil, can speak any kind of Southeast Asian language. And that's where we really saw the model shine. And because we've done through this project and we see the efficacy of this project, I mean, we're looking at Sea Lion very, very seriously.
Fantastic, and we will hear more from Isaac regarding his experience using Sea Lion within that particular use case. And Mark, please, we can introduce yourself to the audience today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mark. I'm the head of partnership strategy and growth at AI Singapore. I look specifically after the product team. And one of the things that we've done is build Sea Lion, this large language model. But before I get into that, I'll talk a bit about AI Singapore. It's a national program that was developed in 2017, built to catalyze the adoption of AI across Southeast Asia, with a specific focus of Singapore being a lighthouse in this region. So where Sea Lion came out of this was, from a research perspective, we understood that most of the language models, like what Singh mentioned, that are out there, tend to be very biased towards both English as a language and Western as a culture, which means this does not fully reflect what we have in Southeast Asia from a linguistic and cultural perspective. And so we've built up this language model on top of existing open source models that are out there to ensure that representation of Southeast Asian languages and cultures will be present in the development of AI as we go into this new frontier of technology. And this is very important because, as you've heard from the others, we are not all only English speakers, and we all live in our own identities within Southeast Asia, and it's very important for us to maintain these identities in technology to prevent us from becoming a very homogeneous or overly homogeneous next step into technology. If you think back last time when the internet was first created, the internet's lingua franca is English, right? And it remained very much so until maybe recently when other languages started coming to the forefront, Indonesian, French, Spanish. What we have now is a chance to get ahead of the curve with languages in Southeast Asia and make sure that we also have this foundation within AI. And that's why we've built Sea Lion, so that users, developers, enterprises that are interested in Southeast Asia can have that access to using AI to engage users within our region.
Thanks, Mark. I think Mark actually set the context actually very clearly in terms of our discussion on stage today. Talking about context, actually, I'm always reminded of an episode from this TV series, Star Trek Discovery. So those of you who know that, that series, right? There's this episode, right, that's called "Context is for Kings," right? So very quickly, bear with me. The episode is really about, the main protagonist of the series. She gets thrown on the Star Trek Discovery, this spaceship, all right? And the captain of the spaceship asks her, to work on a project, all right, which is meant to be a hyper weapon that is banned by the Starfleet, by the Space Federation. And she comes into a bit of a dilemma because she's a do-gooder, strong values. And she said, no, I'm not going to work on a weapon that potentially can be a weapon of mass destruction, all right? But the captain tells her this: universal law is for lackeys, but context is for kings. And he goes on to say that this might be a weapon, at first glance, but it could be really, a hyperspace projectile that can give us a new propulsion, all right, and get us to where we want to go, all right, in the future. Context is for kings. And in today's discussion, really, it's about context. How can we use AI within the context of Southeast Asia, right, and further it so that with the intention of technology benefiting communities, right, that it is not lost just because I don't speak English, I don't write English, right? And that's where a big part of Sea Lion, is about. And the whole conversation between mainstream large language models, right, and the other non-mainstream large language models, and there are many, trust me, especially the ones that are multilingual, right? There is this current, issue or debate, if you want to call it, right, around there, contextualizing the use of the right tool, right, the right technology, right, for the right community and for the right use cases itself. I mean, because of this, right, I think I want to ask Mark the first question. You mentioned a bit about AI Singapore and how you all were set up. Now, in the first place, right, and maybe we have alluded a bit to this just now, why Sea Lion? Why did AI Singapore embark upon creating a Southeast Asia large language model, all right? And I think that was like, before 2022, actually, you guys started, way before that, working on this. I think 2018 or 2016, thereabouts. Please let us know why do you work on this, and after 4 versions of Sea Lion, right? Where do you see, where do you see Sea Lion going after the 4th version?
Sure, thanks. And I really like the analogy you gave, except I'm more of a Star Wars fan myself. So in Star Wars, one of the droids is C-3PO, right? Human protocol droid, thousands of languages or millions of languages spoken. This is something that Sea Lion also tries to help, specifically for the Southeast Asian region. So like what Singh mentioned, we've built Sea Lion over the last 2.5 years, since 2023. Before that, it was more of an national NLP project, right? Not so much on the AI LLM space, but eventually evolved into this. We started building it from scratch, learned very quickly that that's not very feasible. We don't have the same resources as big tech. So what we did is we built on top of existing SOTA models, state-of-the-art models that are out there, to ensure that the reasoning capabilities, the core LLM capabilities are there within the model itself, and then we do continuous pre-training and fine-tuning onto Southeast Asian languages. So we bring in a whole load of Southeast Asian tokens, continue the training of the model to ensure that it is represented within the data that is used to train the model, and that it can understand the context itself. So like what you mentioned as well, we are now at version 4. We've come quite a long way. We are now available on multiple foundation models. We have versions on top of Llama, on top of Qwen, on top of Gemma as well. And this helps to bring that agnostic layer to the architecture and the personality of the underlying AI itself. We have most recently also launched our vision language model because yes, we do like to speak, we do like to text in Southeast Asia, but it's also very important to represent the visual imagery of what we have in Southeast Asia. For example, if we were asked any image generator to generate something like Christmas in Vietnam, a very naive understanding, an LLM with a very naive understanding of Southeast Asia might just put a church in the background, Christmas hats on a random street with Vespas, right? A very naive understanding. Exactly. But with more context, you'd understand that there are certain festivities that also happen in Vietnam or any other region in Southeast Asia that give us this additional identity of what Christmas is like in Southeast Asia. That's not just all snows and churches, right? So back to the question, like how we've been building Sea Lion so far, we really want to ensure that we can make it relevant to the people in Southeast Asia And the one important addition to the recipe in building Sea Lion is that we do it from a very community-driven effort. We don't own the language or the cultures ourselves, right? We do have people from the countries, but at the end of the day, it's the native speakers that we go to help us evaluate and align our model to ensure that it understands that, okay, if I extend my hand to a junior in one of the countries in Southeast Asia, the cultural response should not be to shake its hand. It might be to maybe bring the hand to a forehead or give a kiss out of respect for the elders, right? So we want to bring all of these things into the representation of the model, and we do that through engaging the community to give us this feedback both from a prompt response as well as alignment perspective of the models itself.
Mark, currently how many languages are contained or covered by
Right.
Sea Lion?
So Sea Lion itself currently covers the national languages of all Southeast Asian countries. So that's over 13 languages. That being said, we do also collaborate with a few partners within the countries itself to build what we call offspring models on top of Sea Lion to go deeper into the languages of each of the regions. So we've done that with Indonesia, we've done that with Thailand to expand not just on the main national language of the country, but also to go further into, for example, Balinese, Sudanese, Achanese in Indonesian, and the other languages across the different countries in Southeast Asia.
Thanks so much, Mark. But I think it's all talk if it's not being used, right? What I believe, right? I mean, any technology is great on paper, is great in the lab, but if it's not being deployed, right, at scale, right, then it's not going to benefit anyone. I mean, Alan, I think you have been one of the first adopters, all right, in terms of using Sea Lion within an actual product, right, that is used by your customers, right, for good buds. Maybe you can share with us, your journey of using Sea Lion, why you use Sea Lion, and how you've actually deployed and adopted Sea Lion in your product.
Maybe I start by saying how we even get started. Maybe about 1 year plus ago, what we did was not being a native Bahasa speaker, we need to issue a press release into Indonesia, right? And we are going through our partners in Indonesia to bring the product into market. What we did is we basically take an English press release and we try to translate it and we send it across. The first reaction we got from our Indonesian partner is this: your press release is written for someone who is above 50, then I can understand. I absolutely got no idea what she was talking about back then, right? Because not being a native speaker, we totally do not have the understanding and the nuances of the language. So that got me started and thinking, hey, is there actually an Indonesian model, right? And I attended one of the startup events in Singapore, and I found out about Sea Lion, and that's how the whole thing got started, right? And recently, being the latest release of version 4, what has happened is I took the same press release and now I get it translated. And the feedback is, I can understand this in the first reading, right? So in Indonesia, when you write it too official, even the local has to read it 2 to 3 times before they can understand it. So I think what this gives us the confidence, right? Being a regional startup, what we really want to do is to enter into the market quick, but we actually do not have the capability to ensure that we can address all the language nuances, right? And be able to deploy Sea Lion into our platform, allowing businesses that requires languages across the region to access it, actually help us to make our customer, right, engage their customer even better. So I think one thing I want to be pretty clear here, right? In marketing, it's all about emotion. To establish emotion, it's all about talking at the same language as the customer that you are selling to. If you cannot achieve that, right, you are forming a gap that needs to be addressed, right? So it has been a good experience. Yeah.
Right, fantastic. Alan, I thought it's so good to make clear to the audience, right, your product itself, so at least they can visualize how how your end customer uses Sea Lion. It's a marketing platform. Maybe you can share with us.
So think about it this way. Across the region, when you want to sell something, right, you must have some form of communication. The communication can be an email, could be through a chatbot, could be through a instant messenger system that you have in and whatnot that's attached to your system. what GoodBuds does is we actually are a single AI brain that allows you to convert languages as well as messages, right, across different channels, and the ability to track behaviors and performance, right, once you send it through. If you look at one possible use case is this, right? Imagine that you want to send an email to promote a product, let's say into Indonesian market, and simply just by detecting the age of the audience, right, that you are sending to, a single message can actually be translated into multiple forms automatically and sent to the younger folks with a younger slang, right? The older folks will have a more formal Bahasa language and vice versa, right? And in this case, what you're trying to get to is to be as close to the emotional attachment as you can, right, to the target audience, right? So by doing so, what we are trying to do now is you no longer receive a robotic email response. You know, the slang will fit in when you are younger, right? It's more like Gen X, Gen Z, whatever generation you are in. It kind of tweak a little so that you can feel more close to the customer that you're attached to, right?
So C-Line actually allow your customer to actually tweak so-called the slang, the language based on age group. You know?
Yes. So the way we build it is the customer actually has a choice of multiple models, right? And C-Lion being one of them, and the system can actually start switching, right, depending on the configuration that you put in. Yep.
Right. Very interesting. So for Alan's use case, it's very interesting because they were able to actually deploy C-Lion to the extent that they could customize so-called to the target audience that the customer was actually trying to reach out to. Thanks so much, Alan. For Isaac, it's very interesting. I mean, you heard just now from Isaac, his use case is a totally different use case, right? Whereas I know for Alan, it's really helping customers to reach the audience in the right language, the right nuances of the local language. Isaac had a totally different use case, right? I mean, coming from also the volunteer field, the social services side, I thought this is also a very interesting way in which C-Lion was actually adopted and deployed, and also the multimodal nature of using C-Line as well. For those of you who are not aware, I think there's this concept called multimodal LLM. That means we primarily interacted a few years back with ChatGPT and the mainstream LLMs, right, through text. Right, we key in a question, a prompt, then we got a return, the answer. Multimodal means your prompt need not be through text, right? It can be through an image, through audio, all right, etc. All right, so I thought, Isaac, maybe you can share with us your experience, deploying a C-Lion within that use case that you have.
Yeah, sure. So basically coming back to the problem that we were trying to solve on volunteer recruitment, right? A lot of times, volunteers would prefer to interview with the organization itself purely because they weren't confident in their writing skills as well, which is where the multimodality was quite important as well. But really the way C-Lion kind of shined in this particular use case is one of the questions we ask volunteers is what motivates them to volunteer for a specific organization. And a lot of that comes from lived experiences. So it's when people describe their background of how they grew up or what has inherently built their character over time. And capturing what that means requires a little bit of more nuanced understanding of the culture in which they are coming from, right? So for example, like someone growing up in a strict Asian family might be very different from the definition of a strict family in America or the West, right? And depending on that background, again, the objective was to match them to appropriate roles. And C-Lion has a very generous reasoning model as well. So part of that process is also the administrator wants to understand why the AI made the decision that it made, right? If we say that this person is a good candidate, why is that the case? And the way, when we were doing our testing, the way we saw C-Lion was that it could clearly articulate a little bit of the cultural nuance of what this person might be implying when they describe their lived experience. Like if they say like they felt the disappointment of failing in school and felt the pressure to perform, right? That's a very, very like common experience that maybe we are familiar with. But if you try to throw that experience into like a Western model or something like that, it might not interpret that as necessarily being like a key factor that might shape a person's character on why they want to volunteer for a specific organization. So that's sort of the experimentation we've been doing with Sea Lion thus far, it's still a journey, right? I mean, when it comes to a judging platform in general, you never want to leave it static. You never want to say, okay, we've built this system and we're kind of done, right? It's an evolving process. And in the tech for good space, it's not just good enough to get something out there. You want to get it right? Especially because you're interacting with society, you're interacting with people first. And that's where there's still an iterative learning process. We've not gotten it 100% where we want it to be, but it's definitely a step above just simply adopting a Western model and then throwing it in there. And then it might give you very quick results and might seem on the surface level very reasonable. But when you try to test for more and more edge cases, that's where the cultural nuance really starts to play a big part in the story.
That's an interesting point that I wanted to pick up on. Let's not name any mainstream models, all right, or English models per se, but when you're saying that, you seem like there seems to be a clear delta, especially for the edge cases. I don't know whether you want to highlight what is this that you saw in those edge cases that was so clear to you that definitely, right, having a multilingual, right, LLM definitely works for you, that understands Tamil, Malay, etc. Right? Maybe you can share with the audience.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not a language expert myself, so we had a lot of help in this process as well. But we saw particularly for Bahasa, there's a lot of cultural nuance in how people speak. Very, very specific slang, like I think Alan brought up, that they use. That if you directly translate that to English and try to use that as the way to do the reasoning model, really doesn't translate well. The literal translations of a lot of Bahasa words are very, very, very nuanced, the implications. And especially when it comes to internet slang, right? There's a lot of English slang on the internet as well that can be very misinterpreted by large language models when you're trying to imply something, right? I think in general, even words like gay has changed quite significantly over the years on how people use that language and the implications that they're trying to imply when they say they're feeling a certain way, right?
From happy to gender.
Right, right. So as language is also not static. Language evolves. People use more terminologies. I think we'll start to see a little bit more of a delta between the two. But that's just some of the examples that we will see.
Right. Thanks so much, Isaac. I think we've heard 2 use cases for Sea Lion, very practical, and also in terms of really what the original intention, all right, of those who adopted the technology wanted to get back, right, in terms of outcomes. I think that's quite clear in terms of Sea Lion. But there's a question that I've been thinking of. What could be the other use cases, for Sea Lion, within your domains that you see that could be further expanded? Or maybe I can ask Mark, to maybe throw out a few that maybe that that some of the other communities, companies, or teams are actually working on as well, and can share with the audience as well.
Sure, thanks. I think one of the things that I missed out earlier was that Sea Lion is a fully open source model, meaning that you can take the model itself from our Hugging Face page, deploy it onto your own hardware, and run it on its own. With that, we've also built several quantized models, which makes it even lighter and resource efficient. And the reason we've done this is, one, we fully want to adopt the open source philosophy. And number 2 is Southeast Asia as a region is very resource constrained when it comes to GPUs, when it comes to hardware. So to truly be built for Southeast Asian businesses and for the purpose of Southeast Asia, it has to be resource efficient and available to be hosted on a very lightweight hardware. So with this, we do see Sea Lion being used in air-gapped data environments. So when you go into certain rural areas in Southeast Asia where they have no access to the internet, to Wi-Fi, Sea Lion can still run on certain hardwares that you take further out. This has become very prominent in education-based solutions, whereby schools may not have Wi-Fi or areas further out, right? Want to have the ability to access AI, but do not have the connectivity to do so. So that's one great example because of the open source and resource efficient angle that we have built into Sea Lion. The other one, of course, there are the chatbot and customer-facing interactions. The third one that we see very important, especially with the new modality of vision, is the ability to use Sea Lion for document recognition in languages outside of just English. So I used to do anti-money laundering in the financial sector. And a lot of the times when we do look at sources of income or doing KYC reviews of documents that were from Thailand or from Indonesia, it's very hard to have the understanding of what they're actually writing without having a translator or a local speaker in the room with us. Sea Lion helps with this now because now the LLM, through multimodality, can review the document, give you the exact context that the original writer meant to translate through the document itself. And through these reviews, you have a better understanding of what they want to do, as opposed to a very superficial and naive word-by-word translation or even sentence-by-sentence translation, which might not fully capture the context. So those are the three main ones that we are looking at now. Of course, there are a multitude of others. We've been running a developer challenge over the last 2 months that's going to culminate next month at another event. But we are very excited to see what the winning solutions are. We're quite sure that, of course, from our perspective as the builders, we have this one idea of what it should be used for. But once it goes into the ground, with the crowdsourcing of ideas, we will have so many more deployable use cases, and we're quite keen to see where it takes us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. Alan, I'm thinking whether you're going to start a new business in, offering anti-money laundering platforms for the regional companies. I don't know.
No, I don't think the investor will be happy. I think from our perspective, the usage of Sea Lion will go a lot deeper now. The text and initially we are focusing on text, right? We are definitely going into speech and images at this point in time, right? In fact, yesterday we just had a discussion with a partner in the region, and the partner was saying, hey, if you can do all this, can you just do a OCR, scan a NIM card, and then get it straight away enter in as a lead, right, within the system. Good idea, right? And I think that is very applicable, right? The detection of languages across the Southeast Asian, especially the Thai, you got the NIM card. How do you know whether the detection is accurate and whatnot? So that is most likely the next use case, right, that we will actually leverage on Sea Lion.
Right, and that's very helpful because I think within Southeast Asia itself, there are numerous texts, that people use on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly.
Right? For business and social outcomes itself. Right. So I think hopefully that will be the next, gold mine for you.
Yeah, hopefully.
Isaac, in the social sector itself, beyond Better SG, that project for scanning volunteers, what else do you see could be potential use cases for Sea Lion in the social sector?
Yeah, sure. So I think the tech for good space in general is still very new to the region, right? The concept of a bunch of engineering first volunteers coming into the social space has a lot of challenges. But I think the great thing is that Sea Lion kind of creates a bridge between Singapore and the other regions for tech for good. So there's a lot of other organizations, like there's one called Good Hub as well, that's trying to do tech for good across the region, not just within Singapore itself. And although we have, the good thing about being in Singapore is that you get really good access to a lot of technologies, and you have a lot of well-meaning and well-skilled people to try and get involved in the space. The challenge is then bringing the same solutions that we develop in Singapore to the region. And I think Sea Lion can help speed up that process quite significantly for a lot of the different projects that's going on. There's a lot of other good projects that Better.sg is also involved in. In fact, we have our flagship event tomorrow if you want.
Oh, okay, great. Better.sg, go and Google for that.
Yeah, it's called Beacon. And some of the work they're doing is very, very interesting because it not just touches things like social groups specifically, but even how people interact with the government, right? How people discover schemes like grants and things like that.
Citizen services, right?
Correct, exactly. And that could extend not just to the Singapore government, but to other governments as well. And I think Sea Lion can really play a large role in delivering that information to different audiences in a very, very nuanced way that's more understandable, more readable. Yeah.
Right, thanks, Isaac. And I think both Alan and Isaac, both of you actually have alluded the fact about scaling, because once you deploy, the model itself, I think scaling to other use cases, right, to more users is very critical because this means sustainable business. B, this also means sustainable, use case in terms of outcome you're trying to chase as well. But how does, AI Singapore with Sea Lion help the scaling effort? Let's say, for example, there are some founders in the audience today that want to adopt Sea Lion, right? And then tomorrow comes to you and knock on the door again and say, hey, I want to scale this to another. How does AI Singapore help, this, tinkerers and discoverers, innovators, right, in terms of scaling Sea Lion, right, beyond and in their specific use cases?
Sure. So for Sea Lion, the one important thing to note with business transformation and adopting tech, it's not only about the product itself, it's also about the ecosystem. So it's very, one of my job responsibilities is to go out there and try and ensure that people are aware of Sea Lion. They have access to resources. They can ask us questions. We're very open with conversations on exploring how people want to incorporate Sea Lion into the tech stack. And what we've done is we actually have a free API farm for the development of POC projects that allow you to tinker with Sea Lion before committing from a financial perspective. You can use the APIs. Of course, it's rate limited and it's not infinitely scalable, but that gives you that first step into building a solution where regionally representative AI such as Sea Lion can be used to ensure that you're engaging the correct audience. If you want to develop it further and scale it into a larger project within your organization, there are multiple ways to do this. One, of course, because we are open source, once again, you can deploy the entire model and do further fine-tuning or host it internally from an infrastructural perspective. Alternatively, of course, a lot of people also use cloud service providers for their AI tech stack. So we are available on most of the hyperscalers from Amazon, from AWS, Vertex AI, Qualcomm, available for you to call it from an API perspective, which gives you that flexibility and elasticity in terms of what your usage is and how much you really want to call from an API perspective. So with these different tiers of how to engage Sea Lion for your project or for your organization, we hope it gives you that smoother transition into adopting AI. And I think you would have heard in the previous panel here, a lot of people are afraid to commit too much, or they're sprinting ahead too fast and don't have time to think about what to pivot to or which road to take when it comes to adopting AI. With these more flexible options for using Sea Lion, we hope that this gives you a more comfortable process in traversing in this new AI landscape.
Right, fantastic. I think we still have some time left. So maybe what I want to do is do a summary question as usual, right, for panels such as this, for the three gentlemen here. We spoke about, the use case that you adopted Sea Lion, all right. We saw about scaling other potential use cases as well, right? So I'm thinking, for Sea Lion itself, after using Sea Lion and having used and adopted Sea Lion at a certain scale, right? What is your whole concept regarding mainstream LLM versus customized, multilingual LLMs? Because everyone has a perspective on this, correct? And you yourselves being the so-called front-end users and deployers, right, of this, Sea Lion, right? Where do you stand, on this issue or this argument? Maybe Alan, yeah. Since you're closest to me, sorry. Yeah.
So I put it this way, right? I think one thing as a society, we should never forget that we must maintain the culture that we are in, right? And what I'm seeing from the AI space, for example, right, the explosion of AI has forced a lot of businesses to adopt AI in a very fast pace, right? And over time, you'll realize that everybody starts to sound very robotic, right? And we all know that when you receive an email in your LinkedIn, right, do you believe that it's a human being behind it, or it's basically generated from AI and send it across to you? After a while, if we start accepting those way of communication, we all become the same, right? We have lost something, right? So to me, the reason why I embark on this is, one, to ensure that we are maintaining who we really are, right? I'm not here to force the Indonesian to to read a certain language. Instead, I want me to be in their culture instead of they trying to adapt to mine, right? And then same for the rest of the countries in Southeast Asia. So to me, it's actually pretty important, right, that we maintain such model that is localized, is trained. And gone are the days that we say, you know, we do a global message and everybody accept it. I think that should go away. Yeah.
Isaac, maybe from your perspective.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to the core models that is popular around the world versus like regional models, it really depends on the use case you're trying to fulfill, right? So when you think about AI projects, there's multiple ways in which AI is being utilized in organizations. It could be for code generation. It could be for translating speech to text, different models. And it can be for writing and drafting material, right? So it really depends how you're utilizing it. Like my personal experience with large language models is that the popular large language models are very good for functional activities. So for example, even translating speech to text, right? I think OpenAI's Whisper is still leagues ahead of a lot of other systems out there. But when it comes to actually understanding what that text means, that's where like regional nuance comes into play, right? So I think organizations will need to really think about the strategy in which how they want to employ different types of LLMs for different functions within the organization. In the Tech for Good space in particular, I think for us, because we deal with a lot of social issues that require a lot of lived experiences to really understand, even in places like healthcare and even understanding like social cases, right? That's where regional models start to play a huge role in building that understanding and building the empathy of what you're trying to achieve. It really depends on what you're trying to process in that particular point in that value chain. And I think this might just be the case now, but I think over time, people start to use different LLMs for different use cases in a very, very specific and intentional way. Yeah.
Right, thanks. Now, before I go straight to Mark, right, for his comments on this, maybe I would like the crew to put on screen, right, the QR code for you guys to actually gain access to Sea Lion, right, open source, yeah. So, my bad, all right, I think I should have flashed even earlier than now, but if you're interested about Sea Lion, go and access that. It's open source, all right, go and find out about it, use it, deploy it, look for Mark, all right, and Mark, yes, your comments, on this.
Yeah, so thanks, Singh. On the screen, you'll see two QR codes. The left one is our Sea Lion bot on Telegram. It's free to use. Do engage with it. Test it out in all the different languages in Southeast Asia. We are quite confident that it will give you a more native style of response and also bring the cultural context into the answers that it generates. Now, on the right is our website. We're going through a website redesign now, so please don't judge us on the design yet. But back to the question itself, like where do I see Sea Lion versus other global models? I think actually Alan and Isaac have both covered it and covered the main points here. When it comes to context, when it comes to localization, that's where we see Sea Lion holding its strongest ground. We encourage you to actually use Sea Lion for those specific purposes when context and culture are really important in that specific workflow itself. And what Isaac mentioned about it not being a monolithic LLM or monolithic part of your infrastructure is exactly right. We don't see Sea Lion coming in for the one and only LLM within your agentic workflow. Sea Lion should come in at the agentic arm, helping you to contextualize the answers that have been built by maybe more heavy reasoning models or models that have stronger ability in coding functions or in research functions. You can use other models for that. But if you do have that interface with languages in Southeast Asia or needing the localization aspect of it, please try to introduce Sea Lion there, see what kind of benefits it can bring, and hopefully you will see the value add of having a model that understands the region from both the linguistic and cultural perspectives.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. Thank you, Mark, Isaac, Alan, for your really deep sharing today. And hopefully all of you have really learned a lot in terms of the deployment and this concept about, I'll say non-mainstream, multilingual LLMs, of which Sea Lion is just one of many, to be honest, out there. Context is for kings. Don't forget that. All right. To deploy any technology, the context, the use case is key. right? And that makes a difference whether that particular technology has outcome or has impact for what you want. Thank you, everyone. Really, thanks for your time today. Thank you, gentlemen.
And a big thank you to Singh as well for moderating.